Zoom participants, could you just put something in the chat if you can see the screen? All right, we're good. Okay, so I just want to say thanks to everyone for being here and coming out for the finals. It's been a long process, so I just want to say thank you. And thanks to the teams and the judges for being here. I'll introduce them in a second before we get started. But first, I want Eric Blevins to come up. He's going to say thanks from the Sports Law Institute. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thanks. Yeah, I think most folks in the room know me, but those who don't or those on Zoom, I'm Eric Blevins. I'm the Sports Law Program Manager here at Tulane. I work with Gabe Feldman, who I think everyone also knows is the director of the Sports Law Program, and he sends his regrets he wasn't able to be here today. But yeah, I know everyone's expecting me to run through the list of thank yous, and I'm going to do that. But it's sincere. This has really been an enormous project, not just this year, certainly this year, but not just this year, but over now the last 16 years. And there's a lot of people to thank. But really starting with the students who do all the work and deserve all the credit, beginning with our board members here, but also the Sports Law Society leadership, the 1Ls bailiffing, everybody at Tulane who helps make this happen year after year. It really is an enormous team effort, but on top of that, all of our judges, I know some folks who are brand new this year and some who have been coming for 16 years, certainly including our alumni. We're really happy to have you back in person this year. I think we all agree it's a lot more fun. No offense to everybody up there in the internet. And then in addition, thank you, Fragaman, for sponsoring this year. And last but not least is thank you to the competitors who are still here in the room, those who aren't here in the room, who maybe will watch this or can just sense me thanking them. This event has really, it's become special over 16 years, and it's because a lot of the same people keep coming back and the same teams. And I know coaches have been sending teams for years and years, and we like to think that this isn't just another event, but it's sort of become this special little community in baseball. And we're really proud of it, and we're really thrilled to have that here at Tulane. So it's not an ordinary event or an ordinary list of thank yous. And last, I do want to especially spotlight this year's board, the 3Ls who took charge, who had to do 2 years on Zoom. So a special thank you to Connor Weldon and Rainey Kelly and Wilson Beatty and Thomas Birchfield. So let's give them a quick round of applause. That's all for me. I'll turn it back over to Connor.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So first I'm going to announce the teams and the judges that are presenting the championship round here, and then we'll get started. So first off, we have Team 5 from Fordham School of Law, Haley Lucas, Jake Caruso, and Jordan Zaya. Okay, and then from UCLA School of Law, we have Team 29, James Deegan, Vincent Mahoney, and Sydney Gaskins. And then the judges for this round are going to be John Federoff, Scott Barber, Rachel Luba, Phil Stringer, Mike Mariano, Hamilton Wise, Mark Feinsand, Jay Cohen, and Matt Klein. So with that, we're going to get rolling, and I'll pull your stuff up. I'll pull your stuff up, and then I'm going to go around so I can get the time. I just have to circle around. So
Good afternoon. My name is Sydney Gaskins, and I'm from Team 29. Today, I'm joined with my co-counsel, Mr. James Deegan, and Mr. Vincent Mahoney. Together, we represent a player from the Houston Astros named Kyle Tucker, a World Series champion. Today, you're going to learn that a salary appropriate with Kyle Tucker's performance is above the $6.5 million midpoint at $8 million. There are a few factors to consider when determining how much a baseball player should make. But the main one that we're going to be focused on today is how Kyle Tucker's performance measures up to other players in the field. Before this, Kyle Tucker was making the league minimum. Now we ask that you find him a salary above the minimum. Why is Kyle Tucker worth $8 million and a salary above the midpoint? There are three reasons. Number one, Kyle Tucker is a true five-tool player. Number two, he's been remarkably consistent. And then he led his team to a World Series championship. Let's take those one by one, starting with the first. He's a true five-tool player. The five tools in baseball are hitting, power, speed, defense, and arm strength. It's rare for a player to have all five, but Kyle Tucker does. He's an excellent hitter. Because of his high OPS, he's one of the top 20 best hitters in the American League. He's powerful with top 10 most home runs in the American League. Kyle Tucker was also fast with 25 stolen bases, top 5 in the American League. He was a great defender. Not only does he have a gold glove, but he leads outfielders in defensive run saved. Kyle Tucker flexed his arm strength, leading his team with 8 outfield assists. The combination of power and speed is so unique that in his platform season, he was the only player who got 30 home runs and at least 20 stolen bases. But when you factor in his defense, it gets even better. Because since defensive run saved was first recorded in 2003, there were only 2 players that recorded at least 30 home runs, at least 25 stolen bases, and at least 14 defensive runs saved. And Mookie Betts. Now Kyle Tucker joins them, those types of elite players. So let's talk about how Kyle Tucker was remarkably consistent. Each year for the past 3 years, Kyle Tucker has gotten at least a 4.5 F4 and a 5.0 R4. Showing his consistent ability to create value for his team. Kyle Tucker also placed in the top 30 in the American League for home runs, stolen bases, and defensive runs saved. Tucker and Mookie Betts are the only players in baseball to rank in the top 30 in all 3 of those categories. Kyle Tucker's consistent production made his team better. Ever since Kyle Tucker joined the team full-time back in 2020, the Houston Astros have gotten better each year. Their playoff finish getting better, higher each year, leading to a World Series championship in 2022. Members of the panel, you know that's the best thing that you can do in baseball. And during that time span, Kyle Tucker was first in home runs, first in stolen bases, first in F4, first in defensive run saved. He was their best power hitter, their best defender, the best player on the best team in baseball. Well, he deserves a salary above the minimum. Now I'm going to turn it over to my co-counsel, Mr. Deegan, and he's going to talk about the comparable players in the market.
We will now compare Kyle Tucker to the following players who all received salaries above his midpoint of $6.5 million. We will begin with one-dimensional players like Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and then show you Francisco Lindor and Mookie Betts to demonstrate how much the market values five-tool players. We will begin with Pete Alonso, who received a salary of $7.4 million, nearly a full $1 million above Tucker's midpoint. Alonso illustrates that Mr. Tucker's hitting alone warrants a salary above his midpoint. Alonso, like Tucker, was a great power hitter in his platform season. Both players hit at least 30 home runs, while Tucker was the better run producer, driving in 13 more runs than Pete Alonso. Using WRC+, a statistic that quantifies overall hitting output after adjusting for ballpark factors and the season played in, Tucker and Alonso were extremely similar hitters with a 129 and a 133 WRC+. However, Alonso derived virtually all of his value from his hitting, stealing only 3 bases and playing average defense at a less demanding defensive position. Tucker was a true five-tool player, stealing 25 bases and playing Gold Glove defense in right field. Thus, while they were similar contributors as hitters, Tucker was better overall and more valuable by both WAR metrics, and was named to the All-Star team. For their careers, you can see that Tucker is again a more effective run producer, accumulating 327 RBI to Pete Alonso's 309. WRC+ again demonstrates this very small gap between the two hitters. Tucker compiling a 128, Alonso a 136. While their production as hitters were similar, the overall value they produced for their respective teams was not. Tucker stole 10 times as many bases and was a consistently elite defender throughout his career. Alonso, a negative defender at first base. The overall discrepancy in value between the two players is summarized by the difference in WAR between the two, where Tucker was worth 5.8 more R-WAR and 5.7 more F-WAR. That is an all-star season's worth of production difference between the two players. If Alonso's hitting on its own was worth $7.4 million, then there should be no question that Tucker's roughly equivalent hitting, his elite defense at a more demanding position, and his excellent base running are worth $6.5 million. Our next player, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., earned a salary of $7.9 million, 1.4 above Tucker's midpoint. Both players came off excellent platform seasons, earning spots on the AL All-Star team. However, while Guerrero accounted for nearly all of his value, 1 at the plate and 2 in his platform season, Tucker consistently produced elite value in each facet of the game in each of his full seasons. The career statistics for both Guerrero and Tucker make it clear that Tucker was more consistent overall than Guerrero, and the sum of his total production was greater. Even after extrapolating for 2020, Tucker, first of all, just showed up to work more. He played in 50 more games. As a power hitter alone, Tucker kept pace with Guerrero with similar home runs over his career. He drove in more runs and even accumulated the exact same slugging percentage. Just like Alonso, Guerrero's capability as a hitter is about the only thing he has in common with Kyle Tucker. Guerrero was again a non-threat on the bases and a negative defender, getting moved to first base after showing he couldn't handle the demands of third base. Once again, the difference in overall value between Tucker and Guerrero is expressed by the WAR metrics, which reward Tucker for his incredible consistency and dynamic overall contributions. Tucker was worth 5.5 more R-WAR and 7.3 more F-WAR. In sum, Tucker's hitting, Guerrero's strength is similar to Guerrero, but where Guerrero was the weakest on the base paths and in the field, Tucker was extremely strong, leaving no doubt that Tucker is worth the $7.9 million paid to Guerrero. It is now time to compare Tucker to two players who also share in Tucker's ability to affect the game in a variety of ways. We begin with Francisco Lindor, who received a salary of $10.55 million, over $4 million more than Tucker's midpoint. Notice the salary is also $2.65 million more than what Guerrero received, representing the premium that is placed on five-tool players like Kyle Tucker. Stats show that in the platform season, Tucker was just as good as Lindor. At the plate, Tucker drove in 15 more runners, and WRC Plus shows that the two players were effectively identical hitters. In the field, both players were excellent. Tucker's defensive stats earned him a Gold Glove in his platform, which Lindor did not win. On the base paths, Tucker stole the exact same amount of bases, but did so much more efficiently in 6 fewer attempts, costing his team less valuable outs. Tucker kept pace with Lindor, not only in his platform season, but over the length of his career. At the plate, Tucker and Lindor had the exact same OPS. However, using WRC Plus, Tucker was actually an even better hitter, 128 to 120. In the field, where both players were elite, Tucker saved a full 15 more runs than Francisco Lindor. Finally, on the base paths, Tucker stole bases more efficiently than Lindor, stealing only 4 fewer, but in 14 less attempts. Tucker was successful 87% of the time. Lindor was successful 73% of the time. Our final player, Mookie Betts, is yet another 5-tool right fielder who received a salary of $10.5 million, $4 million more than Tucker's midpoint. In the platform, Tucker, like Betts, was a Gold Glove winner in right field, and they stole nearly an identical amount of bases, but Tucker was the better hitter. At the plate, Tucker hit more home runs, had more RBI, and maintained a slightly higher OPS. However, the most telling statistic is WRC Plus, where Tucker had a sizable advantage of 129 to 107. These same themes apply over the course of their careers. Both players were consistently elite defensively, and while Betts stole more bases than Tucker, Tucker again was more efficient. As hitters, Tucker remained Betts superior with 10 more home runs, 17 more RBIs, and a WRC Plus advantage of 128 to 122. Now, we believe that Francisco Lindor and Mookie Betts are the closest comps for Kyle Tucker. And we will show you that Kyle Tucker slots in between these players and Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero. Now, to examine Tucker again with Betts and Lindor, we will show you how they stack up in 6 key metrics. Beginning with home runs, you will notice that Tucker sits square in the middle of Betts and Lindor for both his platform and his career. By RBI, you can see that out of these 3 elite players, Tucker was actually the best run producer. By OPS, you can see that Tucker was once again between Betts and Lindor for the platform, and there's virtually a dead heat over their career. However, taking into account era and ballpark, Tucker and Lindor are practically tied with a large advantage over Betts in the platform, and Tucker opening up a lead in the career. Moving on to defense, you can see that all 3 were excellent Gold Glove caliber defenders. By stolen bases, you can see that all of these players were virtually the same in their platform. And while the other 2 stole a few more over the course of their careers, we'd like to remind you that Tucker was the most efficient base stealer. So after showing you so many graphs and metrics by which Tucker was as good or better than these 2 players, you can see why Tucker deserves to be paid at least within $2.5 million of Francisco Lindor and Mookie Betts. In conclusion, we feel that Tucker's status and production as a true 5-tool player lifts him out of the salary class of one-dimensional sluggers like Alonso and Guerrero and far above his $6.5 million midpoint. Further, in addition to being elite in all phases of the game, he was consistent year to year with elite production. He was also the heart of the World Series championship lineup with the most RBIs on the World Series champion. He was the best player on the best team in baseball in the last 3 years, leading the Astros to the most valuable prize in Major League Baseball, a World Series championship. Thank you for your time, and this concludes our opening remarks.
Good afternoon, members of the panel, spectators, opposing counsel, and all those listening online. My name is Jake Cruz, and I'm joined by my co-counsels, Ms. Haley Lucas and Mr. Jordan Zaya, in today's arbitration proceeding for the Houston Astros for the 2023 Major League Baseball season. Before we get into the thick of things, we want to first show our appreciation to Mr. Tucker in terms of his contribution and what he has done to help lead this team to success in an ultimate World Series run this past postseason. Under the collective bargaining agreement, Mr. Tucker has filed a salary at $8 million, with our club filing at $5 million, giving us a midpoint at $6.5 million. If you, the panel, find that Mr. Tucker is deserving of even 1 cent below this midpoint, then he is deserving of that $5 million allotment. On the next exhibit, we see some of our recurring themes that will come through in this presentation. The first being that Mr. Tucker is absolutely an above average player, but he's not yet an elite one. The second being that he has regressed in his platform season and has shown a level of inconsistency where we disagree with the opposing counsel's remarks. The third is that there are comparable players, namely Mr. Nolan Arenado, Mr. Manny Machado, and Mr. Trevor Story, who all made $5 million at our club's offering for comparable or better play during their platform seasons and throughout their careers up to the first year of arbitration eligibility, all while having more or similar accolades. And these three factors are all factors that the collective bargaining agreement asks arbitrators to consider when coming to these awards. And it's important to keep in mind, did Mr. Tucker's performance exceed these three comparable players by $1.5 million or by 30% more in value? We disagree. On the next three slides, you'll see a recurring pattern starting on Exhibit 3 of a narrative where Mr. Tucker is an above average player, but he's not yet elite and does not deserve to be compensated at such a rate. First, we will look at his batting average, where he finished 67th in the Major League Baseball this past season, 80 points below Jeff McNeil. And I'd like to point out that our league high average is wrong. He had a 326, not a 346. Again, this shows that Mr. Tucker is an above average player, but he's not yet elite. On Exhibit 4, we look at his slugging, where he placed 23rd throughout Major League Baseball. It's another similar story of above average play, but not elite play. He was 200 points below Mr. Aaron Judge, who had the league high in slugging during last season. A story even closer to average is seen on Exhibit 5 when we look at his on-base percentage, where he placed 58th in Major League Baseball, 100 points below Mr. Aaron Judge, who again had the career high. Mr. Tucker has demonstrated above average performance yet again in another statistical category, but not elite performance, and does not deserve to be compensated at such a rate. The next slide on Exhibit 6 shows the platform year and the PY -1 year, where you can see the areas that are highlighted in red where Mr. Tucker regressed. These are key statistical categories in measuring an offensive performance. His batting average, on base percentage, and slugging, which accumulate to a term called the triple slash, and his OPS. You see the regression all in red in his platform season. A drop of 110 points in his OPS and a drop of 80 points in his slugging. These two seasons show a very different caliber of player, and this inconsistency is why he should be awarded below the $6.5 million midpoint. On Exhibit 7, we see the 3 full seasons that Mr. Tucker has played with the Houston Astros. In these 3 seasons, he has not yet demonstrated offensive consistency to receive above the $6.5 million midpoint. Again, he showed progression from his 2020 to 2021 season, but further regress in his 2022 season from his 2021. His triple slash, his OPS, his WRC plus all took large hits. And it's difficult to award him above the midpoint without seeing a clear consistency in progression and performance. The players that will be compared to Mr. Tucker have either outperformed or comparably performed to Mr. Tucker in their platform seasons and in their careers, all receiving at our $5 million club offer. And as my co-counsel, Mr. Zaya, will get into it, we feel that he should be awarded at a comparable rate to these players and that our $5 million value is fair. So I ask you one last time, should Mr. Tucker be valued $1.5 million more than these comparable players? Or 30% more in value? I now will pass it off to my co-counsel, Mr. Zaya.
Thanks, Mr. Caruso. I might turn your attention to Exhibit 8. We'll see our comparable player market, where we see the aforementioned players of Mr. Nolan Arenado, Mr. Manny Machado, and Mr. Trevor Story. All players who have earned below the midpoint and equal to our club filing of $5 million. When we compare Mr. Tucker to these three players, it will become apparent that his performances are worse or comparable, and he should be compensated as such. Moving on to Exhibit 9, we'll go to our first comparable player, Mr. Nolan Arenado, then a third baseman for the Colorado Rockies. At this point in his career, Mr. Arenado was a 3-time All-Star and a 3-time Gold Glover. And he earned $5 million after his 2015 platform season. If we look at their career statistics on Exhibit 10, we see a lot of green for Mr. Arenado and a lot of red for Mr. Tucker. And on top of this, both players are extremely versatile. We acknowledge Mr. Tucker bringing a lot to the table. However, Mr. Arenado, if we look a little closer, has a higher batting average, strikes out less, has a higher on-base percentage, and is equivalent to a defensive wizard, stealing 10 more bases at a more demanding third base position. Moving to Exhibit 11, we'll see their career trends. And as we see in key statistics of home runs, slugging percentage, OPS, and batting average, Mr. Arenado is not only progressing onward opposed to Mr. Tucker's inconsistency, but he's also doing so eclipsing Mr. Tucker in their platform seasons in all of the categories. Exhibit 12 will go into that platform season, where, as we can see, there's a lot of red for Mr. Tucker almost all around, with Mr. Arenado leading him by almost 30 points in batting average, almost 100 points in slugging and OPS, while having a higher DRS and WAR, which shows overall encompassed value being above that of Mr. Tucker. Furthermore, to summarize on Exhibit 13, Mr. Arenado, when combining their platform season statistics, their overall career performances, and his prowess, has a 3-time Gold Glover, a 3-time All-Star, and a Silver Slugger, so that if he earned below the midpoint, then Mr. Tucker should be in that same echelon of players as well, with less accolades and inferior performances. Exhibit 14 will bring us to our second comparable player, Mr. Manny Machado, then a third baseman for the Baltimore Orioles. At this point in his career, Mr. Machado was a multi-time Gold Glover, a multi-time All-Star, and a recipient of the Platinum Glove as the best fielder in all of the American League. And Mr. Machado still earned below our $6.5 million midpoint and earned the same as our club filing and Mr. Nolan Arenado at that $5 million mark. Exhibit 15 will bring us to their career comparisons in their statistics, where we see Mr. Machado having more consistency in batting average, which is something that opposing counsel has lauded throughout their presentation. Mr. Machado did all of this with a higher career number in batting average, and again, while being a superior defensive player at a more demanding position of third base, racking an 18 and 27 defensive runs saved during his 2 full seasons. If we move ahead to his platform season in 2016, very similar to Mr. Arenado, who led in almost every category, we see much of the same for Mr. Machado, as we see green almost across the board. He led in almost 30 points with batting average, while having a higher on-base percentage, slugging percentage, OPS, all while saving 4 more runs and having better counting stats as well. And another statistic we're going to get into, which is very important, is WAR, where we see for both measurements throughout both his platform season and his career, Mr. Machado exceeds Mr. Tucker's amounts in both, showcasing his superior value that he brings to a team, bringing more wins than Mr. Tucker does for his Houston Astros. Exhibit 18 will show us more glaring differences in statistics as well, with Mr. Machado leading with significant gaps in both batting average and slugging percentage. Exhibit 19 will show much of the same with OPS and on-base percentage. Again, with Mr. Machado being above Mr. Tucker for both. So to summarize, on Exhibit 20, Mr. Machado's superior platform season, his more consistent career, and his more superior accolades, namely his 2 Gold Gloves, his 2 All-Star appearances, and his Platinum Glove, along with a top 5 MVP finish, showcase more of a number closer to an elite player than Mr. Tucker has, as Mr. Tucker's produced as an above average, but not yet elite player. He should likewise earn above the $6.5 million midpoint. Exhibit 21 will bring us to our third comparable player, Mr. Trevor Story, then a shortstop for the Colorado Rockies. At this point in his career, he was an all-star, a silver slugger, and an NL League leader. And he earned that same $5 million mark that Mr. Machado, Mr. Arenado, and that the club is filing for after his platform season of 2018. When we go to Exhibit 22 to view their overall careers, we see these 2 players being almost direct comparisons. If I turn your attention to their batting averages being about the same story with their on-base percentage and having the same exact home run mark, just with Mr. Story doing so in 100 games fewer, showing that in less time, he's been able to produce more, all while improving on the defensive end as well. And we look on Exhibit 23 to their platform seasons. And very similar to both Mr. Arenado and Mr. Machado, Mr. Story leads in almost every significant category. He batted almost 40 points higher, had a higher on-base percentage, and his slugging and OPS were both almost 100 points higher than Mr. Tucker's. He did all of this while saving the same amount of runs and producing a higher WAR, again showcasing that higher value that he brought to his team. Exhibit 24 will showcase these glaring differences in their platform seasons with graphs. And as we can see, Mr. Story again having a significant advantage in both batting average and slugging percentage opposed to Mr. Tucker. And Exhibit 25 will show much of the same with their OPS and on-base percentage. Again, with Mr. Story having a significant advantage over Tucker. So to summarize on Exhibit 26, Mr. Story and Mr. Tucker are both very comparable players. Their careers are almost identical. They're both versatile players, and they both have comparable accolades to show for it. All of this while Mr. Story has boasted a better platform season than Mr. Tucker, and showing that if he still earned below the midpoint, then Mr. Tucker should as well. So for Exhibit 27, we're going to go back to our comparable player market. And it's become apparent that Mr. Tucker is an above average, but not yet elite player to earn above this $6.5 million midpoint. And I'll ask you the same question that my colleague, Mr. Caruso, asked you. Has Mr. Tucker warranted a salary $1.5 million above our 3 comparable players, all of whom have better platform seasons, accolades, and careers? The answer to that is no, which is why Mr. Tucker should earn below the midpoint of $6.5 million. And he should be paid as an above average player with a $5 million mark for this coming season. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna take a quick little recess. You guys are welcome to stay here. Go out in the hallway if you wish, 2 minutes. Pull those up now. Get it? Is it still in the same?
Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Mahoney, and I'm going to be presenting the rebuttal on behalf of the player, Kyle Tucker. Now, over and over, counsel for the Astros asked you, is Kyle Tucker worth $1.5 million more than these comps will ever make? The answer is yes, absolutely. And here's why. Now, first, Kyle Tucker was one of the best players in baseball in his platform season. Second, Kyle Tucker has consistently produced value more than any of the players below the filing number, below the player filing number. Third, he has more career production than any of the players below the midpoint. And finally, as the Astros pointed out, he's the only player with an extensive playoff track record and a World Series championship out of all comparable players mentioned. Let's take those one at a time. First, while counsel for the Astros did try to convince you that their star of their World Series championship team was not one of the best players in baseball this year, we disagree. He was the only player to hit 30 home runs and steal 20 bases. He ranked in the top 10 in the American League in home runs, top 5 in stolen bases, top 20 in OPS. He was recognized as one of the best players in baseball, being named to the All-Star team this platform season. He was recognized as the best defensive right fielder in baseball with his Gold Glove. And he was recognized as one of the most valuable players in baseball with his finish in the MVP vote. Furthermore, they did cherry pick some stats to make it seem as if Kyle Tucker is somehow getting worse. But all of those stats were in his slash line. And Mr. Tucker derives his value from being good at everything. And if you look across the board, his 30 home runs, that was a career high. His 25 stolen bases, that was a career high. His 14 defensive runs, that was a career high. His overall value expressed by his F4 of 4.7 was a career high. We do not see where Kyle Tucker regressed. Furthermore, any downward slope could be attributed to the fact that he was already elite. Now, they tried to use numerous players who rely on 1, at most 2 excellent seasons. Kyle Tucker has 3, which makes him very unique in the comparable player pool. He was the only outfielder in baseball over the past 3 seasons with at least 4.5 F4 and at least 5 R4. Now, counsel for the Astros did talk at length about consistency, year-to-year consistency. So let's talk about it. If you look at all the players mentioned, you'll see how many of them had seasons above 4 F4. You see at the top of the salary scale, Francisco Lindor impressively had 4. Mookie Betts had 3. Kyle Tucker had 3. If you look below that player filing number to Vladimir Guerrero and Pete Alonso, still above the midpoint, only had 1. And out of all the players below the midpoint, Manny Machado is the only one with multiple seasons above 4 F4. None of them can match Kyle Tucker's year-to-year consistency and overall production. Let's look at those players one by one. Now, if consistency is so important to the team, it would follow that the most consistent players put up the best numbers over their career. If you look at the career across the board in the counting stats, Tucker has far more runs scored, 18 more home runs, 80 more RBIs, 60 more stolen bases. The only disadvantage he has up there, even in the rate stats, is batting average. But Mr. Arenado was playing his home games in Colorado. If you use WRC plus, which normalizes for ballpark and era, it's not even close. Kyle Tucker had a 128 WRC plus for his career, where Mr. Arenado was barely above league average in far fewer games. Now, if you look at Manny Machado, you see very similar trends. Specifically, I want to draw your attention to the counting stats. Mr. Tucker had 20 more home runs, 108 RBI, 37 more stolen bases. If you think of players with 20 home runs, 37 stolen bases, and 108 RBI, that's an elite tier player in a season. And that's a full season more production that Tucker has over Machado in the course of his career. Finally, Trevor Story, yet another player playing his home games in Colorado. And you see where he does take advantage of his ballpark to put up similar rate stats and home runs. Tucker still drives in 60 more runs, swipes 25 more bases, and again, opens up a sizable lead in WRC plus which makes it fair to evaluate Trevor Story playing in Colorado and Kyle Tucker playing in Houston. If you look at the overall value provided, once again, it's not very close, with Tucker at 16 and Story at 11.2. We just would also like to touch on, out of these players, Kyle Tucker has more than double the next most games in the postseason, with none of the players below the midpoint playing in more than 6 postseason games. Tucker played in 50 and helped the Astros win a World Series. So if you look at the whole group together, you can see that the only 2 players, including Lindor and Betts, who can keep up with Tucker as a hitter by WRC plus, are Guerrero and Alonso. But those players aren't anywhere near the defender he is, and aren't anywhere near the base stealer he is. If you look at the players below the midpoint, you'll see that there's a considerable gap in WRC plus of 13 to the next highest, Manny Machado. However, if you look at the players at the top end, Mr. Tucker looks very similar. All in the 120s for WRC plus, all of them Gold Glove winners, all of them above 60 stolen bases. Which brings me to our conclusion. Kyle Tucker is a true 5-tool player. He does everything well. And he's done it consistently for years for the best team in baseball. Something that none of the players below his own filing number can say. So counsel for the Astros asked you, is Mr. Tucker worth 1.5 million above their team filing number? The answer is no. He's worth 3 million above that filing number, the full $8 million, but which is easily enough to get him over the minimum. Thank you.
Now, opposing counsel just came before you, and they brought you many points to try and convince you that Mr. Tucker is worth above the $6.5 million midpoint. And I actually want to take the question back that we had asked before. What has he done to show himself to be above the $1.5 million more than our 3 comparable players? The answer is they all have more accolades, better platform seasons, and better careers. But to bring up our main points in this presentation today, we're going to go to Exhibit 2, which show, when looking at the complete picture of Mr. Tucker's career, that he's demonstrated himself to be above average, but not yet elite. They also talked a lot about Mookie Betts and Francisco Lindor. And while these players are 5-tool players, Mr. Betts and Mr. Lindor are both more. They're superstars. These are elite players that should earn above the midpoint, not someone like Mr. Tucker. They also mentioned Mr. Guerrero and Mr. Alonso being one-dimensional players. However, players receive arbitration salaries in different ways. Some receive them from their accolades and others for their power. And it must be noted that power pays. And especially when it comes to Mr. Guerrero and Mr. Alonso, both players that put up historic seasons to justify why they are above the midpoint, something that Mr. Tucker has yet to do. Mr. Tucker is more comparable to our 3 players, and that would become apparent after seeing all of the players combined. Exhibit 3 will show us the 2 superstar talents of Mr. Francisco Lindor and Mr. Mookie Betts, who both earned well above the midpoint and Mr. Tucker's demand. And this was highly justified. As we'll look into on Exhibit 4, when comparing their career accolades, which again are a huge determinant in a player's arbitration salary, we see that both these players have 2 times been top 6 finishers for MVP. They're both multiple All-Stars. They both have Gold Gloves, Mookie Betts having 2 of which, and Mr. Lindor having 2 Silver Sluggers and Mr. Betts having 1. Stats that Mr. Tucker has not yet accomplished. Moving to Exhibit 5, we summarize Mr. Tucker versus Mr. Lindor. And simply put, while we appreciate Mr. Tucker's contributions, these two players are not comparable. Mr. Lindor is the far superior player than Mr. Tucker, and likewise should be compensated as such. Mr. Tucker has not demonstrated the same prowess, the same accolades, and the same performances to justify himself being in the same tier as Mr. Lindor and Mr. Betts. Exhibit 6 will bring us to another comparable player that opposing counsel has mentioned. And they tried to downplay Mr. Guerrero's career compared to Mr. Tucker with this consistency argument. However, Mr. Guerrero at his best is the best. As we see his accolades, he earned $7.9 million, 1.4 over the midpoint. And he did all of this while being a league leader in most statistics, being an MVP runner-up, only to Shohei Ohtani, a two-way player who had put up a performance that none of us have seen before in baseball. He was an all-star starter, he was a silver slugger, and he was a winner of the Hank Aaron Award. Exhibit 7 shows their platform seasons, which are not comparable. As we see on the gold stars, that's Mr. Guerrero leading the AL, specifically in the key statistics of the slash line of on-base percentage and slugging, all while having 200 points higher in OPS, a higher WAR, 40 points higher in WRC plus, and while being top 3 in both batting average and WAR. Mr. Guerrero was not just one of the better players, he was the best, something Mr. Tucker has not shown us. As we see on these charts, the significant differences between OPS and RWAR in their platform seasons show why Mr. Guerrero is above the midpoint. He's an elite player. Mr. Tucker is not. And then we go to Mr. Pete Alonso, a first baseman for the New York Mets, who opposing counsel had also mentioned. They did leave out some tiny points about Mr. Alonso, however, as during the beginning of his career, he achieved feats that none of us have ever seen before. Eclipsing 50 home runs in a season is something that is extremely rare. To do so as a rookie, as the most home runs in a season for a rookie, showed history for Mr. Alonso, and we see him consistently leading in home runs for their careers. And members of the panel, power pays. Moving to Exhibit 11, we see these career home runs and how power pays along with these accolades, being the home run leader, rookie of the year, an all-star and member of the all-MLB team. And he did all of this while being compensated as the face of the New York Mets, something that Mr. Tucker is not. Moving on to Exhibit 12, to summarize, Mr. Alonso's superior power and his historic seasons have shown why, with his comparable accolades, why he is above the midpoint and Mr. Tucker should not be in that same category. Moving on to Exhibit 13, we see the platform season wars for all the players. And opposing counsel on their rebuttal mentioned stat picking. Well, we see some cherry picking with them as well, leaving out the key statistic of WAR, the all-encompassing stat to show a player's true contribution to a team. And we see that all of the comparable players lead Mr. Tucker, except for Mr. Alonso. And all of these show why he should earn below these players and below the midpoint. So if we look at all the career accolades, we see that every single one of these players has significantly more than Mr. Tucker. They're all household names, and they've all demonstrated themselves to be elite and not above average like Mr. Tucker. When combining this with his inconsistency and how he is an above average but not yet elite player, it becomes clear that he should earn below the midpoint of $6.5 million. And he should earn $5 million for this upcoming season. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break and let the judges deliberate. Well, thank you to the competitors as well. But we'll be back for final announcements and some awards. All right, thank you to everyone for being here and thanks to the competitors and the judges. I just want to make a couple more, regards and say some thanks to some other people before we announce everything. So first I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Fragaman, helping put this on. I mean, this is our first in-person competition after a couple of years of Zoom. I know our senior board members, we've never done it in person, never even seen it before. So having Fragment come in really helped us out. That was great. I also want to thank everyone who bailiffed. I want to thank the junior board members as well. Like I said, we need the students here at Tulane to help put this thing on as well. And people really love to get behind it here. So just want to say thank you to everyone for that. I also want to thank the MLBPA for helping sponsor this as well. And Greg Dreyfus, he helps us with all the problem sets. He helps us with the numbers. And he really wishes he could be here, I assume. So he couldn't make it though. But I want to say thanks to Greg. Hopefully he'll be able to make it back next year. And then the other judges, the ones who weren't in the final round, Rex Gary, he had to leave, but I want to say thanks to him as well. Nona Lee wasn't feeling too well, so I hope she gets feeling a little bit better. And then I want to say thanks to Jordan Jackson back there, former board member. Thanks for helping to come. Thanks for coming to help us put it on. And then Juliana, thanks for coming in at the last second. You guys really helped us out. You as well, Ben. Josh Purcell and Haley Leviton. Sorry, I just blanked on your name for a second, but thank you. Seriously. You guys really helped us out. So now I'm going to announce the other winners. So we have the written advocacy winner for the briefs that they submitted. And for that, we're going to have team 28 from Villanova. So I want to give a round of applause. There's not a representative from there. We will get you your trophy in the mail. If anyone's watching this on Zoom. And then for the oral advocacy award, it's going to go to Sydney Gaskins from UCLA. You don't have to first that. Hey, you can take it in front of it. Yeah. Hey, yeah, thanks to both teams and all the judges for the help, seriously. And now I'm gonna let John Federoff announce the winner for the finals here.
Before I announce the winner, I just want to say, on behalf of the judges, what a wonderful job both of these teams did and all the other people that performed. I know that some of us, I've started doing this competition 15 years ago because Professor Feldman was a former colleague of mine. And for the students here participating, you've got just a great group of judges and people that give their time, really knowledgeable people in baseball, really knowledgeable in salary arbitration. And I can say we all really enjoyed coming down here and seeing all of you do this and also getting to see each other. So it's a wonderful competition and everyone's done a fantastic job. Before I announce the winner, I'm going to give a little bit of feedback kind of on behalf of the group to both teams at a very high level, or else we'd be here all day if we asked all of us to speak. I think I can say as a group of judges, we thought this was, I'm not talking to you guys now, one of the best finals we've ever seen. I think that all of you, from an advocate standpoint, some of us here are lawyers, a lot of us make baseball arguments and the like. All of you were fantastic in part because you sort of argue within your personality. You did different arguments, but you were yourselves. You had great command of facts and the circumstances. I thought from the club standpoint, like you made, I kind of felt there listening, like this is exactly what a club would say. This is exactly how they say it. And it was good. It was based on statistics. It made the right points. And I would say from a player side, you made it emotional. You made it about the player. You got our attention right away. And it was a fantastic job. And it was hard to pick a winner. And I will say it was a split decision. Is that what you call it? Yeah. Is that what they call it in boxing when it's like 2-1 or something like that? But ultimately, the Bruins prevailed. So. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone on Zoom for coming. This will be recorded and put out. And and the written competition winners will be announced shortly. We'll send that out via email and get that award sent to you. So does anyone else want to say anything, or are you good to go? All right, thanks, everyone. Perfect. I'll do.